When you were talking about the shooting ranges, just a question came into my mind. DCNR also has shooting ranges on their property in some places. Is that correct?
I don't know, Pete.
I'm not aware of any.
I know there's one in Little Pine State Park in the district I represent. So they're totally separate from the game commissions. Because I was just on both websites, and there's a $30 fee to use ranges. Is that $30 fee? You have to have one if you're going on DCNR from DCNR, and then you have to have a different $30 permit to go on a PGC?
Yeah, different one? Yeah, so it'd be a different fee.
Okay, I just had never thought about it before.
Yeah, I know where my local shooting range is. I'd never even thought about DCNRs.
Yeah, they've got a number of them also.
Yeah.
So, Representative Muller, you might want to talk to DCNR also and see, maybe you can go that route. Back to CWD and the high fence, the high fence areas. Is it, to your knowledge, in other states, does whatever the game commission's called in other states, do they regulate the high fence areas in their states, or is it like our state where the Department of Agriculture regulates those high fence areas?
It's different by state, but the trend usually is the lobby industry for the deer operations try to get them put under ag. Like, for example, North Carolina, that's the effort right now. They're trying to take it away from the Wildlife Agency and put it under ag. The Wildlife Agency in Texas, for example, still has control. So it's a mix depending on the state.
And that is something that is determined by the legislature?
Yes, absolutely. In this case, Act 51 is what determines that in this state.
And I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you feel that if the Game Commission had the authority over those fenced areas with deer, that you'd have a better chance of controlling CWD?
We have the law enforcement capacity and the ability to enforce it. No questions about that. We have disease management areas that we put in place. Really, we feel that in talking to ag, they don't disagree. The deer should be looked at as a collective population, whether it's in the fence or in the wild. Collectively, we need to manage deer together. So in other words, obviously we can see what happened when the deer that was moved from within DMA2 and moved outside of the DMA. Now I've got an expanded DMA that now goes into the elk range. If that deer was not able to be transported to that facility, this likely wouldn't have happened.
And from your point of view, what things could we do in Pennsylvania to, because it's obvious that the CWD is getting out of the fenced areas, at least it's obvious to me, to what could be done to make it more difficult for the disease to be transmitted from a fenced farm out into the wild?
Well, it all goes down to movement. We have issues with, for example, if a hunter shoots a CWD positive deer and he moves that carcass and leaves it, that's a high risk factor. So it's the movement of these deer that are the issue. In DMA2, for example, we can't tell you if a deer is positive in a pen because it got it from the wild deer outside or the deer. There's just no way to tell that. But we do know that if the deer that is positive is moved outside that DMA, then absolutely you've got potentially a new area of infection, and that's the way CWD spreads. So, without pointing fingers, the fact of the matter is, if you move a positive deer and you put them in another exclosure, guess what? You have a new infection area. Now, whether or not that leaves or not. So if you look at New York, for example, they've been able to have good regulations on movement of deer within the state, and they don't allow any from outside the state. That seems to be fairly effective with them because let's face it, the deer industry doesn't want their pens infected any more than we want our wild deer infected. It's not good for their business either. New York's done a good job of being able to tighten down on that. It's a very complex issue. It's an issue that is made more complex because of outside interests that the drive from industry usually is we don't want any regulation, and that doesn't get us in a good place usually, and this is one of them.